Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Meeting House. I'm Dwight A. Moody, your host, where we have conversation on religion and American life. I'm glad to welcome back to the Meeting House for our conversation today the Reverend Dr. U.A. Thompson. He's a scholar and a pastor and a businessman.
Thank you.
And an advocate for civil rights and human rights. I'm glad to welcome you back to the Meeting House today for our conversation today on wokeness. I read this at the Conservative Political Action Conference earlier this month. Speaker after speaker attacked woke ideology in their speeches to conservative activists. What in the world are they talking about when they use the word woke?
Well, I think there is a political agenda afoot in this country to draw comparison of this term wokeness. Political polarization is at the zenith, at its zenith. This country would like for there to be two Americas. And the agenda, I think, is for there to be a contrast of sort to divide this country in half so that one side can be the controlling ruling class at the expense of the other side. The opposite of woke is asleep, but in its simplest form. Woke is being conscious of those who are marginalized at some level, those that are being lost, looked over, left out at some level in society, those that are being oppressed and trampled over by the iron foot of oppression. And it is no harm for those persons to be woke and conscious of those who are unable to defend themselves under the iron foot of oppression. We need wokeness.
I feel like I'm woke.
Absolutely.
I think I'm more familiar with the term awakened.
Yes.
Woke is just a shortened form of that.
Yes.
But to be awakened to what's going on in the world,
right,
what's going on in our community, things, as you say, on the other side of town,
right,
that we try to sometimes ignore. This, of course, has been part of the legacy of the whole civil rights movement going
Absolutely.
back to the 1950s.
Absolutely. I have cautioned and continue to caution and will continue to caution prophetically the Republican Party and those like the Republican Party against moving away from its core principles and attacking actionary terms like wokeness and things of that nature.
It's a diversion what classically the Republican Party has stood for.
Absolutely. And I think that is dangerous. I think when you play to or placate yourself for a national agenda, for some Christian nationalism, you do yourself a grave injustice by signing on to some platform instead of mandating the principles that you have normally stood for: capitalism, conservatism, fiscal responsibility, so forth and so on, that defines your platform. Get back to what you are known for and have run on. You will be far better off and respected for that than to jump on to these political buzzwords that come and go that will often inflame masses and create hostility in communities and end up isolating and marginalizing large voting blocks and demographics of people that you would otherwise have perhaps reached with your message.
Now, you're saying this, of course, as a Republican yourself. aren't you?
Absolutely, absolutely.
That is, you have been connected with the Republican Party in its traditional sense.
Absolutely.
Ronald Reagan, the Bushes.
The Bushes, absolutely.
But has all this this new identity of the Republican Party, is this a Trump thing?
I think so. I think this was brought, the big tent, as you would say, I think began to deflate through the messaging that former President Trump brought, because out of the auspices of growing, you started fanning the flames of hostility and violence and racial rhetoric and all of those other motivating factors to bring in an element, though undesired, to increase participation at the expense.
I agree with this because Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, ran on anti-woke.
Absolutely.
DeSantis in Florida ran on anti-woke.
Yes.
Governor Abbott of Texas
Yes.
is governing on anti-woke.
Right, right.
Are they just, as you say, appealing to
Absolutely.
to the prejudices of their constituencies?
Absolutely. And I think the dangerous part of this, we must remind them that inside of wokeness, regardless of all of the other ingredients and agendas, inside of wokeness is the civil rights agenda.
Yeah.
I would go as far to say inside of wokeness and at the top of wokeness is the civil rights agenda.
It's the racism.
It's racism
Right.
at the zenith of it.
It's at the bottom, it's in the middle,
That's
it's
right.
at the top of it.
That's
isn't
right.
It? I
There
agree
is
with
no
this.
wokeness without the civil rights
So
agenda.
when they want to talk about the woke mob,
Yeah.
they're talking about what's happening in public schools about teaching about Juneteenth.
That's right.
Juneteenth.
That's right.
Which I never even heard about.
That's right.
Until I got out of graduate school.
Right, right.
They want to teach about the Tulsa race riots.
That's right.
Which I never heard of.
That's right.
We didn't teach it. It's been an effort to integrate
That's right.
this history,
That's right.
black history, slave history, into the teaching of American history, and this grassroots pushback is just another form of racism,
That's
isn't
right.
it?
It is being taken as a frontal assault on the black cause and the black agenda in America yet again.
Yet again.
Yet again.
So we had the period of slavery, we had the period of Jim Crow, and now this is a massive pushback against the civil rights movement, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. And you look at it as a regurgitation. Here we are yet again fighting yet another war. Here we are yet again, after all that we have stood for this country, with this country, after all we've been through in this country. We have progressed, yes. We have been with this country. We have been through a lot in this country. We have won so many battles.
That's right.
And we have fought so many wars. But here we are yet again.
Still fighting.
Still
the same-
fighting, having to wage yet another war.
Is this a racial thing, or is it a class thing, or is it a wealth against poverty, or is it a power struggle, or is it all of that?
I think it's all of it. I think when you look at the community at large from an African American perspective, I think we are the only community that you see so much of all of that you just mentioned in so many different areas not having come up at various levels. There's pockets and segments. For every one Oprah Winfrey, there are a million others that are not her. Millions of others that are not her. For every one Tyler Perry, there are millions upon millions of others that are not. And then you have to look at the fact that their wealth is so recent. They're first generation wealth.
First generation wealth.
And so we are living with first generation wealth in our community that have been since America was founded.
And to some extent, we're still in first generation national power.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now there's, the blacks have had power in certain places in the country. Atlanta, you know,
Right.
it's been a couple of generations. We've had black
Absolutely.
mayors in Atlanta and New York.
Right, right.
But at the national level, we're still in the first generation of black power, aren't we?
First generation of black in many areas, in practically every arena of life.
Yeah.
We just, I think no less than a year or so ago, just got our first black circuit court judge in Greenville.
Really?
Yes.
And the black population in our county is about 15%, am I right there?
About 14, 15%, yes. So we are still first in a lot of areas.
Of course,
I'm
we've
sure,
got you know.
Well, you know, yes, I try. I try.
You've been out there
Mighty
stirring
long
things
time.
up.
For a long time, yes, sir.
You rabble rouser,
Yes,
you.
sir. Try my best.
You told me earlier in a conversation that we were the last
county
in the country.
in the country to get a Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. And we had to fight tooth and nail. One night we had to do a shut-in at county council chambers. Literally they had to lock us in. We refused to leave. And the only way we got it, we marched across Church Street, shutting it down. Reverend Jesse Jackson came to town many times. We protested. And the only way we got that to pass in Greenville County, we ended up having to unseat 3 county council persons and put others in their place in order to get that passed.
3
in
white
Greenville.
ones, I guess.
Yes, in order to get it passed in Greenville County. But we were the last county in the entire country. And that means everyone else in the county, in the state, in other counties, in other states, in the United States of America, was closed on that day, with the exception of Greenville County. So my question was, who are you guys going to do business with if everyone else is closed and you're still open? And they still said, no, we're not going to pass it. But thanks be unto God.
And you and Jesse Jackson and others.
We now have a holiday in Greenville County. It's somewhere in the Jet magazine. I think they have since gone off. To my surprise, I had a broke arm in one of these occasions. Reverend Jesse Jackson, myself, Reverend J.B. Adams, God rest his soul, he's now in heaven, and Councilwoman Lottie Gibson, God rest her soul, she's now in heaven. I had the privilege of being on the front cover, the 4 of us, of Jet magazine. It was a national magazine at the time. With that broke arm, we were standing there strategizing in one of those council meetings at a break.
No telling what that edition of Jet magazine is worth these days
You're right.
with your picture on the front of it, right?
Well, you know, that and a cup of coffee will get you something.
If you've got that edition of Jet
yes,
magazine,
I would
hang
love
on
to see
it.
Yes, absolutely.
But now we've got a black man who's the senator from South Carolina.
That's right.
What a shock that was.
You're right.
Is he going to run for president?
Senator Tim Scott, yes.
Is he one of the old Republicans or one of the new Republicans?
Well, Senator Tim Scott, actually, believe it or not, I know he gets a lot of bad press, but Senator Scott is a good man. He's a good-hearted person, and he's a very smart man. He's calculated, and I do believe he is going to run for president.
You going to support him?
Senator,
you going to be on his team?
well, I haven't made that decision yet, but Senator Scott is a very good man. He has a good heart, and I do believe he's going to run for president, and I do wish him well, as do all. I wish all presidential candidates well on both Democrat and Republican side, and safety. I do believe Senator Scott will have a strong chance. I don't know what this presidential race is going to look like on either side, but I do believe he has a strong chance at the presidency.
Do you think this campaign, anti-woke campaign, is going to be a central feature of the Republican platform and the Republican agenda?
Those that are smart will drop it. Those that are not will keep it up.
Well, DeSantis down there, it's like the only horse he's riding right now.
To his demise, I think DeSantis is making a grave mistake in doing that. I think his chances for president are slim anyway, to none.
And this is further marginalizing
Yes,
him
it's
among
further
the general
marginalizing.
population.
Absolutely. I think his problems are way beyond Florida, but Florida have a strong decision to make concerning him remaining governor, I believe, because he have done some damaging things, I think, to the minority communities there with his decisions.
Well, even to the majority
Absolutely.
community, the school teachers, the
Absolutely.
school district, you
Absolutely.
know, in Kentucky, which is my home state, the last Republican governor we had led a campaign against public schools. Well,
Right.
this galvanized the whole teaching profession in the
Right.
state, and he got defeated after one term.
Right.
It's hard to demonize the whole public education community, which is what DeSantis has done, isn't
Right,
it?
absolutely. You know, any person, regardless of party, who cannot govern for all the people,
All the people.
do not deserve to hold the office of the people. And that's simple truth for any person,
At the
regardless
national,
of
at
who
the
they
state,
are
yeah.
at any level.
At any level.
National, state, or local. And so I believe that to be true forever. And so I am disappointed in DeSantis, and I won't call him what former President Trump is calling him, but
because they're at odds with each other.
they're at odds with each other, and I'll let them handle that for themselves. But I just don't believe that he is doing what is good for the people of Florida, and I don't think he will do what's good for the people of the United States.
Now, here we are in South Carolina,
Yes.
a deep red state,
Yes.
with a statewide black population of what percent? Is it
I think we're around 20% or
20%? Do you think this anti-woke rhetoric and policy will take root and have an impact in South Carolina?
Well, I do not believe it will, because one thing we do have in the state of South Carolina, we have a lot of Black Baptist churches with preachers who are prophetic. They preach a prophetic gospel. We have a lot of African Methodist, Episcopal, and Zion churches who preach a prophetic gospel.
Yeah, the AME Zion.
Yes.
AME and AME Zion.
Right.
That's their heritage.
That's their heritage,
birthright. Yeah.
yes. And others who preach prophetically. And so that means we have preachers who hold politicians accountable.
Like you.
Yes, and bring them to task concerning policy. And so they have to come through our churches. And when they do, we hold them accountable prior to coming, we hold them accountable while there, and we hold them accountable when they leave. And so I don't think this wokeness will have its place in South Carolina. That's why you don't hear much about it.
That's what
Yeah.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything about
Right,
it from
right.
the governor,
Absolutely.
from either one of
No,
the senators.
No.
They've not gotten on this
Right.
anti-woke
Right.
bandwagon, have
Absolutely. No, not at all. Not at all. And I suspect you won't hear much about it. You hear it in other states. That's because that's where it's popular at. You know, even Ambassador Haley, now presidential candidate Haley, she speaks about it when she's away, but when she's home, you don't hear that in her rhetoric or her speeches here, because it's not something that you do here in South Carolina.
We've been talking about the national political element of this wokeness and anti-wokeness, but it really is does it ever really filter down to the grassroots, school board policy? We've seen what DeSantis has done in Florida by mandating, by squelching the teaching of certain things,
Right.
as part of his anti-woke campaign. I haven't seen that in our state.
Right.
And that's where things really water hits the wheel, as the old saying goes.
Right.
Whether we're going to be able to expand the teaching of Black history, or actually immigrant history, women's history, gay history, any of the marginalized groups, whether their stories can find a way into mainstream history and sociology and political teaching at the high school or college level.
Right.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I've been reading a lot about the campaign to funnel state money out of public schools into private schools.
Mm-hmm.
It's going on now big time in Texas
Right.
and some other states. Has there been an effort to do that in South Carolina?
I don't think so. I know we have school choice, which is a big thing now, and a lot of money is going into that or being purposed for that. We have charter schools, of course, that are one of the driving forces here in the state. But we have a great superintendent who just took office, I believe.
At the state level?
At the state level, Superintendent Ellen Weaver, who have an excellent agenda going forward. I think it is, and we've talked about this, you and I think the classroom is an excellent place for minds to be sharpened and to grow. And I think when we start limiting the expansion of a mind and
by banning books,
and start suppressing knowledge, lesson plans, and dictating what a person can and should be taught, I think we do a greater damage to the pupil than we do anything. And I believe that we should allow pupils to have access to as much information as they possibly can so that they can decipher and discern what it is they need and what they do not need. That's the true process of learning.
You know, one of the great challenges we have is just to get kids to read books.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of kids that, in fact, is an article out this week talked about how reading has declined.
Well, I believe it.
The reading of books. Now, they may be reading their pads,
right? Yeah,
and their phones, but here we are. People are suppressing books and telling them that they can't read a book.
Right.
I have a friend who has a book on one of these banned lists.
Really?
And he says, "Thank God for the ban. My sales went way up when I got on that banned list."
Well, that provokes you to want to read, Yeah,
I told my congregation I wanted to start a banned book club and read just the banned books.
Right.
That's what they ought to. That's what the high school kids ought to do.
Well, you say do not touch or do not enter. That's the thing you want to do.
That's exactly what you want to do.
It might increase sales.
It does. It's
Absolutely.
the forbidden fruit.
Absolutely.
Going after the forbidden fruit.
Absolutely.
We ought to tell them, well, we're going to ban the Bible. Wonder what that would do.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of parts of the Bible.
That's right.
That are graphic and violent.
That's right.
Very sexual.
Songs of Solomon, pornographic things.
There's some episodes in the Bible that could never make it into a school curriculum, could it?
You're right. Songs of Solomon.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you for having me.
We're in the Meeting House. I'm Dwight Moody, the host, here where we have conversation on religion and American life. My guest today, my friend and neighbor and colleague, a ministerial colleague as well, the Reverend Dr. U.A. Thompson.
Sir.
Both of us residents of Travelers Rest, South Carolina, coming to you from the studios of WGGS in Taylor, South Carolina. Thank you for joining us today. Join us again in the Meeting House. I'm Dwight Moody.